Welcome back to another edition of Real Spiritual Talk Radio. I am your host, Lamont Gates, once again bringing you the world of faith, metaphysicality, and spirituality. Joining me today, ladies and gentlemen, is near-death experiencer Alexanne Stone. Alexanne, welcome to Real Spiritual Talk Radio.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. Really happy to meet you.
Thank you very much. Same here. Glad to have you on. Now, before we get into your account, Alexanne, I would like to go backwards and talk a little bit about your religious history, if applicable. Was there any religious belief systems you held prior to having your near-death experience?
Interesting that you should ask. I was raised on Hellfire and Brimstone Presbyterian, and then early on questioned, like before I was even 10. So I actually started doing a search, and I tried out all different kinds of religions to find an answer. And by the time I'd had my near-death experience, I'd had Rosicrucianism under my belt as far as unorthodox religions go. And when I had my near-death experience, I was following Guru Maharaji around the world. And that is a very highly spiritual-based experience. So
it sounds like
lots. I checked out so many. I signed up for Scientology so I could find out what it was about. I just checked out all kinds of religions just to kind of find a base of what.
And this was as you were a young child?
Between the ages of 10 and 25.
Wow. If I may ask, what made you so curious?
Really, standard religion did not add up. If there was this God, well, and I'll just say this, you can do whatever you want with it, but I was raised singing this song. Jesus loves the little children, all the little children of the world. They are red and yellow, black and white. They are precious in his sight. Jesus loves the little children of the world. And then all of what happened, they reached puberty, and now we don't like their color. We don't like their religion. It didn't add up. If there was a loving God, then why the heck was there hell? Why were we being punished for something that we never even did? So it just didn't add up from very, very early on.
And it seemed to really spark your curiosity, which led to this versatile search for truth, spiritually speaking.
Yes, really did.
Now, with that said, why don't we get into your near-death experience? But before we get into that exactly, why don't you tell us what it was that triggered the near-death experience to actually occur?
Sure. I had something called an ectopic pregnancy, which I was 25. I'm going to be 71 in January. So it was a long time ago. But what happened back then was they didn't have the technology to slice open a fallopian tube, take an embryo out, sew it back up, and you're good to go. Back in those days, they would remove the entire fallopian tube. And this was my second one, and I knew what was happening, and I was in absolute denial and refused to go for medical care all the way until the tube was ready to burst. So I was at, oddly enough, a Guru Maharaji festival in Miami, Florida, when I became so sick that I had to go to the hospital. And that's what triggered it.
Okay, so right. So take us back to the hospital and what exactly occurred that led ultimately to the near-death experience.
Okay, so I'm in the hospital, but I was, Guru Maharaji was all about meditation, which still is there. So I was calm enough to meditate through the pain. And then every once in a while, it would just overtake me and I would become moaning and groaning and yelling and screaming. But when I went to the hospital, I was pretty mellow because I was really trying to stay focused, not attach any meaning to the experience that made it more dramatic. So I'm in the hospital and they're not giving me any morphine. They're not giving me anything. And I'm on the table while there's 2 or 3 doctors on one side, I guess, conferring about what they're going to do. two doctors. And there was a nurse sitting to my left in a chair. And at one moment in time, I looked at the nurse and I said, I'm leaving now. And I floated up above my body. I was floating up toward the light, and then over above the roof of the ceiling, way past the ceiling, I flipped back over. And I watched these doctors running around like crazy in the room. And I just watched it for a little while. And then I came back in my body and I turned to her and I said, I'm back now. And she said, I know you are. Isn't that? And I watched them, whatever they were doing to take care of what's happening with me. It was surreal. Lamont, the thing that's so incredible about it is there was no attachment, no feeling of any sadness, no feeling of any drama, no, nothing. It was just this calm, easy, unattached watching of all these people running around. And I found it really interesting. But I also wanted to talk about this, and you may have run across this in others. I have dreamed of the tunnel with the light at the end since at least age 5. So I can never quite get to the light, probably, thank God. So, but I've played with that tunnel with the light at the end in dream time through my entire life. And I've never been able to get to that light at the end of the tunnel so far.
So going back into the hospital, it sounds like you had what can be described easily as an out-of-body experience. And very often what you stated about not being attached to the physical body is what I hear from near-death experiencers who also have out-of-body experiences. In fact, there was one gentleman that I interviewed who said he had this out-of-body experience and he was looking at his body and just couldn't even believe that was him. He just saw himself as being so unattractive, you know, in addition to not being attached to the physical body.
Oh, interesting. I didn't have that, but there was an awareness that there was just this thing laying on a table, because it wasn't me. The me was conscious at a higher level, if that's the best way to say it.
Yes, it's like the physical body wearing a jacket. When the jacket comes off, you are still you, but the jacket is just laying on the couch or wherever you're laying the jacket. There's no attachment to the jacket until you need it, which obviously you did because you came back into your body.
Exactly. I wasn't done yet.
Now, what's interesting is that you knew you were going to leave your body. How did you know you were going to leave your body?
That part I do not know. That part I don't know. I just remember just turning and saying, I'm leaving now.
In addition to that, when you left your body, when you came back into your body, the nurse said that she knew.
Yeah.
There is a such thing as shared near-death experiences. I don't know if that's what happened there, but it's, or maybe she just had a knowledge that this is a common thing amongst patients.
I think more that than anything else is that nurses have seen it a lot, from what I understand.
Now, you talk about having dreams about seeing a tunnel, but not being able to make it quite to the light. Now, would you describe these dreams as being recurring dreams since you were young?
Absolutely. Since I was very, very young, even at age 5, because I remember bringing them up with my father, telling my dad about them. And he broke from religion at one point in time and became a Rosicrucian, which is why I ended up going to Rosicrucianism too. And he had a lot of belief in past life memories and future lives. And so when I talked to him about the tunnel, he just said, "Yeah, you're just having a dream, and it's not time for you to go yet." And I used to play with the dream. To see how it was really interesting, Lamont. I would head down the tunnel and decide I'm going to go as close to the light as I could get. And the closer I came, it kind of moved away, but the force on my body, my physical body, was too much to bear. It was really heavy. And so I would stop chasing the light and come back to this life. But I was conscious of those dreams, partly because my father was someone who taught us to pay attention to dream time and to notice what was happening, to remember dreams and to notice what was happening in those dreams. But it was so interesting because at first it was like, yeah, just the tunnel was really, really wide, and then it gets more and more narrow, but it's the same light at the end. And the light is almost calling, but not quite. But the force to try to get to the light is like, no, it's not time yet. Get back. That's my interpretation of it.
Are you still currently having these dreams?
I do. I've had them recently.
And it's very, very interesting that you say that you had these recurring tunnel type dreams, because very often near-death experiencers only really start having these vivid recurring dreams after the near-death experience. So for you to have had this prior to the near-death experience, it's another piece of inexplicable information. You know, some may say you were blessed as a child.
I was blessed as a child, trust me. So yeah, recently, and I think we talked about this a little bit, I've been undergoing chemotherapy for lung cancer, and I did not smoke, by the way. It's from Agent Orange on Guam during Vietnam. So anyway, during this time, there was a surgery where they took out the upper right lobe. And I didn't have a near-death experience, but I did have the experience of people who had recently passed coming to visit. That was interesting too, consciously coming to visit.
Was this recently, or was this something in the past?
No, this was 2 months ago.
Okay. And I wanted to talk about after effects anyway, because very often near-death experiencers talk about coming back from their experience with these higher levels of empathy, precognition, premonitions. Once again, they may have vivid dreams where they are recurring dreams. Did you come back with anything remotely close to these?
I think more than anything, I came back with an understanding that this is not the only life. That there's so much more that my little pea brain can't possibly understand. And I know I had conversations with my father at one point in time about all of this, and he was saying, listen, I can't even fathom, even though they've gone to the moon, I can't even fathom in my brain how far away the moon is. How can you possibly expect me to understand the size of the universe, or that this is the only life? He's like, I can't fathom it. And so it's the same for me. I can't fathom it with my little pea brain, but I know at such a deep connected level inside myself that there's so much more.
Talk to us about absolutely. Talk to us about these deceased relatives you saw once you went through this particular procedure. Perhaps this is another after effect of your near-death experience. And who exactly were these deceased relatives? Were you familiar with them?
Yeah, it was my father, my mother, and my favorite uncle who just passed away last year. And my parents were younger looking, but my uncle was he was 88 when he passed, and he looked 88 when he came. And I was fresh out of surgery, still on the very first day. And I thought initially, oh, it's my time to go. They've come to get me. But they were smiling and waving, and they came and they went. And then I've had a couple of times where they've come in dream time since then, smiling and waving, not time yet. And then it's an after effect of, there's a connection that takes place when you have that near death. You're freed. I got freed from the worry of my own mortality. Oh, this is a big effect. So for me, I'll just say it out loud. I often have to manufacture sadness when someone's passing, because that's what society expects from us. I manufacture the sadness because I know someone is in pain. I understand that part now. However, I'm not really that sad because they're not gone. They'll be back whenever they choose, and or they are in a different realm, in a much higher level of consciousness than the one that happens here. So that is an after effect of that near-death experience.
And I think as you go on with your life, you may discover even more, other than this interview here.
Yeah.
More after effects, that is.
It's been a long time since I've ever talked about it. So it's really interesting to have this conversation with you and be piecing things together.
Yes, yes. What a miracle that can happen out of a simple conversation, huh? With that said, also, I know you mentioned earlier about your father being into past lives. You've done something in the realm of past lives as well. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. For the past 30 years, I've been a trainer in something called neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP. And I specialize in trauma therapy. So sexual domestic violence, PTSD, and just plain I can't handle life trauma. And the work that I do takes people back, regresses people in this lifetime, past lifetimes, ancestral memories. Clients have had memories from the birth canal. They've remembered when they were conceived. They remember that they came from other planets and decided to be light bringers here on Earth. It's not mine to question, it's simply mine to facilitate. The work that I do that's so powerful is it's therapeutic, but it's not talk therapy. So we go back to a past life, regressing you for whatever memory comes up, and you find out why you went through what you went through. Typically, Lamont, people remember the traumas. They remember their birth, they remember their death, or they remember some trauma that happened this lifetime, past lifetime, or to ancestors that they've been carrying generationally. So that work, once we find why you went through what you went through, then they rewire their decision about who and how they are. And we carry that rewired decision all the way up to now. Then we go out into the future because your mind can't tell what's real and what's not. It can't tell. It makes stuff up about the future all the time. It's called 9 times out of 10 anxiety, because anxiety is a negative emotion from the future. So we take people out into the future and I assist them in creating what they want in their lives, having let go of what took place in the past. And people's lives change dramatically, sometimes immediately overnight. It's the most fulfilling work. I'll do what's called a therapy session with someone, and I'm higher than a kite by the time I finish because they feel great afterwards, because all of the pieces of their lives often fall into place and they understand at that deeper level why they went through what they went through and how knowing it can now shift their lives entirely. So that's the regressive work that I've done.
Absolutely fascinating, because if one interviews enough near-death experiencers, very, very often indeed, they may hear the concept of reincarnation or past lives being connected to their near-death experience in some way, shape, or form. So that's why I'm very glad to hear from past life regression therapists and anybody working in that particular field. Now, going back to the religious question, I know we started off with that, and you said you were a seeker, very young, starting from the age of 10 all the way upwards. Since your near-death experience and these after effects, what does religion look like to you now? Are you still a seeker, or are you a bit more, even more open-minded about the topic of spirituality?
I wouldn't say I'm a seeker. I don't think I'm a seeker anymore. I'm at peace with understanding that there's so much more than we can possibly understand. I do not believe in organized religion, and vehemently opposed to it. Although I will respect someone's beliefs, I have tons of friends who are of different religions. It's not a determining factor of friendship or anything like that. However, I am not a fan of organized religion and am grateful that I'm not. Just don't follow it. I mean, how can you follow something that was created 2,000 years ago or 4,000 years ago or 5,000 years ago and think that's the only way? There's so much more.
And that's very common when people of strict religions come back from a near-death experience as well. They're just blown away because they didn't realize that what they saw was much more than what their pastor or their minister preached to them last Sunday, prior to their near-death experience.
I know.
So you're absolutely on the ball with that one. After you had this particular near-death experience or this out-of-body experience, did you tell anyone about it?
I told a lot of people about it. Yeah, I shared it pretty openly. And I questioned it. So after this happened, I was taken to, I had a couple of really powerful memories as a result of it. And I was taken to, I lived in Niagara Falls, New York, and my favorite uncle was high up in Rosicrucian. He couldn't even say what level he was. He took me to the Grand Master in Toronto, Canada, to start to decipher what had happened and to find out, okay, here's my experience. What does this mean? What happened? Is it real? Am I making it up? And this Grand Master, of course, said, you're not making it up. This is a real experience. And it's kind of like what you said. You've been really blessed. And now what are you going to do with it? How do you live your life knowing what you know? And how does it affect you? And this is an interesting thing too. I have made several times in my life, I've made a choice to cut off the knowledge of that deep level of spirituality and dive into the regular world for a while. And I've always kind of seen it as an experience, an opportunity to learn something, and then come back every single time to the deepest level of spirituality. And my life now is surrounded, the people closest to me all hold the same understanding of beliefs, whether or not they've had a near-death experience.
And that should be very comforting to know that you've got that support, that belief support around you. Now, you mentioned that you shouted it to the rooftops. You told everybody about your out-of-body experience and how, I guess amazing it was for you and how unattached you were to your body, and that there was something, you knew that there was something else more than just this earthly material reality. Yeah. What were most of the responses like? Were most of the people you're putting up the the cross sign there?
Yes. Wicca, witch, you're a witch. This is not real. You've been misled.
Okay.
It's just a dream. You're making things up. This is the religion truth. So I think we're human beings and we're afraid of our own mortality. I mean, when someone dies, you are faced with your own mortality. And so for people to say, okay, hey, there's tons of lifetimes and you were here before and I was your mother, you were my mother, or whatever, it's very confrontational for people. So I learned I can't just like spew it out. It's got to be tested and gently shared, and in some cases not shared at all, just because someone's just not in a space where they would be able to hear that.
And you have to understand, it's just tradition upon tradition upon tradition being passed down generationally. We talked about generations earlier, but that's exactly what a lot of religion is. It's just passed down, refurbished tradition, and it's so ingrained in them. It's like Christmas and Easter ingrained on the calendar, you know,
Yeah.
and to share something so mind-blowing and so vast that goes beyond what they've ever been trained in, then, you know, they're looking at you as if you have two heads. It's just
Yeah.
foreign information to them.
It is
So,
foreign information, and it brings up a lot of fear, because what if I've dedicated my life to believing in hell, and I better, you know, be a good person, whatever my definition of a good person is at that moment in time. And here comes someone who says, wait, there's no hell, there's no heaven. I always used to say hell is right between these two ears, boy.
well, you know, with the advent of the internet, social media platforms, I think near-death experiences are making their run around the planet, and a lot of people are becoming more spiritual, I think, today. You look at the statistics of churches where people are actually leaving churches. A lot of times on those surveys, the reason why is because they're actually searching for God. They couldn't find God inside of these churches, so now they're coming out of it, and they're listening to near-death experience accounts, and hopefully, you know, we can run into some new spiritual revolution if this information gets to enough people.
I believe that we are. And so that was part of the reason that I wanted to do this, because I haven't talked about it in years. But when Alicia told me about it, I was like, oh, I want to talk about it. And just the questions that you're asking are bringing up a different understanding now after all these years of not having talked about it and taking it for granted. Oh, this is just all what happened, and now I understand it, and it's just part of my life, no big deal. But now I get to dive a little bit deeper. And after our conversation, I know I will have a conversation with my partner, and we will talk. He and I will have a conversation about the depth, because he's sitting here listening to it right now. So
Yes.
he's actually giggling in the background.
Yes, yes. And don't forget, since you were a child having these recurring dreams about a tunnel and reaching the light, that there was a blessedness there, and never forsake the blessedness of your actual experience itself, because you've been given keys, you've been given a gift that most people haven't seen or experienced, that would love to, but they probably wouldn't want to go through the same bodily trauma you went through to get that.
And it's opened up. I think this is the biggest thing when you ask what it does. It's opened up my ability to listen to other people's experiences, to just be a space, hold the space, be an open vessel for them to grow in whatever level or wherever they are in their lives at this moment in time.
Absolutely profound words from someone who's been there. Well, Alexanne, I want to thank you for coming on Real Spiritual Talk Radio and sharing with us your absolutely fascinating account.
You are so very welcome, and thank you for opening the doorway for me to take another look at it.
Absolutely. Keep opening those doors, because there's a lot of people out there that actually need to enter through that doorway.
Yeah. Thank you, Lamont.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, Alexanne Stone.